My name is Owen. I'm one of the lead pastors here. It's great to meet you and welcome to the church if you're here for the first time. We're so glad. As you can see, you're welcome to just come to this every Sunday, but there's so much more going on in the life of the church as well that you can partake in. If you're at home, welcome. So great to have you with us. If you were here a couple of weeks ago, you'll have heard me talk about Christ not being Jesus' surname. Actually, it's a title. It's a title that we give him. So Jesus Christ, it's not his surname, it's a title we give him. And it means anointed one. And it was applied to his life retrospectively. Peter, John, and Paul, three of the most important apostles in the history of the church, actually, they apply it to him retrospectively. I'm just going to remind you what those quotes are from the Bible. So in Acts 2:36, Peter says, so all the people of Israel should know this truly. God has made Jesus, the man you nailed to the cross, both Lord and Christ. And then in Colossians 1:15-17, the Apostle Paul says this, the Son, that is Jesus Christ, is the image. Just listen to these words. Like he's describing a human being here. The Son, Christ Jesus, is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For in him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible. He is before all things, and in him everything or all things holds together. Now those words might be very familiar to you, but just remember that Paul is talking about the man, Jesus of Nazareth, who died and was resurrected. And then John writes his account is Eponymous account, and also the letter to that we call Revelation. He says this in John 1:1-3, talking of Jesus again. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. Isn't that a stunning statement of who Jesus Christ is? Absolutely stunning. And what's most significant is that these three most influential people in the history of the Christian church are making this point. This is not some esoteric author. This is not someone left of field. These are the guys who formed the church in Christ's name. So we've got to take his words very seriously. And this got me thinking, if Christ Jesus is in all things and holds all things together, then wherever we look, can we see Christ? Wherever we look, wherever we can sense something, are we seeing something of Christ holding that together? And what I wanted to do was actually hear some people talk about their stories of how they've encountered Christ in their life. And we're going to be hearing from at least two people this term about this. And our first guest today is Sam Sayer. Would you give her a big warm welcome? Now, Sam and I are birthday twins.
We are.
And I am the older one. You can tell that just by the way we look. Isn't that right, Sam?
That's not true.
But we are birthday twins, and we've known each other for a long time, actually, haven't we? Probably around about 7 years, is it?
9 years,
9
maybe?
years, isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
It's gone quick, hasn't it? We were in our early 40s when we started talking to each
Oh,
other.
thanks, Owen. Enabling cover. 30s, people, 30s.
Thank you so much for agreeing to share with us today.
That's quite all right.
You know, you've got such a wonderful story, and also you speak the story of other people as well. So, but let's kind of first of all just hear a bit about your story, about what's life been like for you. Where did it all start?
My mother, I think it started with. So I was born in Norwich, home of Olivia Colman, to a fairly normal family, I would say. I have two brothers. And our Christian family, so we were dragged along to Methodist Church in Norwich, and I was very aware of Jesus. He was everywhere, I would say I was quite a good daughter at that point, quite a good child. At age 7, I was taken to a Christian camp in the middle of nowhere, and I would say then I had an experience of Jesus, age 7. And I always knew he was my friend. I knew that he was with me. I think I was slightly strange as a child. I used to spend a lot of time with animals and would just sort of pray for animals and things like that. I don't know if that's weird.
No. Doesn't sound weird. It sounds perfectly innocent and childlike. It sounds wonderful.
Yeah. So, So kind of that was me age 7. And then I think for me, something I would describe as a formative experience was going off to another Christian holiday. We didn't have holidays that weren't Christians, really. My mum and dad used to take us to church on a Sunday, even if we were on holiday. Is that normal? I don't know. Anyway.
How was that for you? How did it make you feel?
Really annoying.
Where did you want to go
be
instead?
On the beach.
Oh, right.
But they would do that. So, yeah, I was at Spring Harvest, which is a quite well-known Christian holiday. And I was so I was about 10, I think, at this point, and I was in this ballroom, which is always thrilling to be in a ballroom, and there was a song being sung by the band on stage, and it was a song that was directly from Proverbs 31, and it said, "I will speak out for those who have no voices." It's quite an old song, so you guys might not know it, but and there was something in that moment that kind of made me think, oh, I think this is a job for me. I think I need to be doing this. And I just wanted to just read Proverbs, 2 verses from Proverbs 31. This was the bit that the song was based on, if I can get my phone to behave. These are the words. It's, speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute. Speak up and judge fairly, defend the rights of the poor and the needy. And what's kind of amazing is that those 2 verses have been like a banner over my life. And I'll explain a bit more about those in a minute. But I think it was just in that moment that I just thought, yeah, I think that's what I need to do.
Wow, how old were you?
I think I was about 10.
Wow, that's quite an awareness for a 10-year-old, isn't it?
I told you I was weird.
That's incredible. No, it really is. And your experience of Jesus at that time, what was he saying to you? How would you characterize your relationship with Jesus?
I think it was the friendship thing, you know. I think I just felt safe with Jesus. I talked to him. I used to pretend around this time that I was in Amy Grant music videos. So
just tell us who Amy Grant was.
So Amy Grant is an American singer-songwriter who now is in her, I'm guessing, late 60s probably. But at the time, I used to borrow our neighbours' dogs and take them for walks in this big heathland near our home in Suffolk, which was where we lived then. And it's really sad, but I just used to pretend that I was in her music video singing the song through these big grassland kind of heath meadows with these 2 dogs, and imagine, hope that no one would see me from school. But yeah, so that's what I used to do. So I think I think one of the amazing things as well is that from age 13 on, I was part of a really good church youth group that was part of a Brethren church in my town. And one of the most exciting things for me was that there were boys in this youth group. And at the church that I grew up in, there were just my brothers. So obviously that was a kind of motivating factor. But it was brilliant. We used to all go away together. It was a Brethren church, so it was quite male-dominated, which latterly I've discovered is not really my bag. But, it was amazing. The Bible teaching, all of that was really, really good.
Do you look back now on your time as a child and your relationship with Jesus then with fondness? And is it just sentiment, or was it more than that? Do you long for that kind of simplicity of relationship that you had then?
I think I still have that now, Owen.
Great.
I think I've always had a kind of childlike faith, actually, and I think I see things quite simplistically, and you'll sort of realise maybe why that has had to be as I continue to let you into my life. Yeah. But, it's just, it is like that. I am still 10-year-old Sam, 7-year-old Sam, putting her hand into the hand of Jesus every day.
Yeah.
That's kind of how it is.
That's really profound. Now, tell me about your burgeoning passion for people who can't speak up for themselves, like that Proverbs 31 talks about. How did you first come into contact with people that were refugees and asylum seekers?
Well, I spent my 20s in London, and I was part of a big church, and one of my friends there decided it would be a really good idea to drive a converted ambulance to the Croatian coast to build a children's playground at a peace centre on this coast. And this was around the time when the former Yugoslavia was in crisis, and children, there were, in the way that we've seen Ukraine in the early days of the Ukraine conflict, we were seeing on our TV sets kids and young people, all sorts, being displaced in Bosnia. And so this peace centre was set up by some Americans to be a place for kids from Mostar in Bosnia to come and learn how to be children again. So we basically made, I'm rubbish at this, by the way, we made these like animal shapes and things to make this children's playground. And what was kind of disconcerting was these kids would arrive, and within 5 minutes they'd be playing war games around this children's playground, and we were like, no, look at the animals. But they were, of course, kids, and kids do run around shooting each other, and sadly some of these children may have seen that. So it was there that I met children coming out of Mostar, but also we went up, one Easter Sunday, we went up to a refugee camp in the hills in Croatia, and that was where I first met refugees who were living in like these sort of breeze block, they were like garages, breeze block garages. And we divided up as a team, and I was a bit passive aggressive because we had to take in chocolate eggs, and I was like, they don't need chocolate eggs. They need new lives, being very idealistic. They were delighted by the chocolate eggs, by the way. But we were divided up and went in to meet with some of the families who couldn't speak a scrap of English. I couldn't speak Serbo-Croat, but there was something about the experience of sitting with a family who had made cake. I've no idea why, because I don't think they even had much power, but they made this very pink cake, and we were able to sit with them and eat this cake, and there was something about it, it was just a moment of humanity and solidarity. And I started to think to myself, I know that there are people coming to the UK to claim asylum. So I would have been, this was my early 20s, okay? And it just started to kind of fan into flame, I suppose, my passion for refugees and asylum seekers.
So that then became a vocation for you, didn't it? How did that happen?
Well, it happened by volunteering. So I arrived in Bristol in 2000, and I'd been working for a film and TV company in London and had been made redundant, and had come to Bristol and started volunteering for a charity called Refugee Action. And so I essentially became an advice worker. So we were giving people who were coming through our doors advice about how to claim asylum, getting their kids into schools, getting medical help, all that kind of stuff. And I then ended up getting a job with them, and I did that for 10 years, which is a long time. And it was the most amazing grounding for what came next, because I met so many people from all over the world. And I'm not really very well travelled, but I used to say, oh, it's all right, they come to me. I don't have to go through customs. And I think for me, I love being around people. I love being around people from different places and just finding out about people's culture and who they are. And so for me, that was an amazing education for the next adventure.
And that next adventure took quite a lot of courage. How much of a step was it for you? And how much did your sense of calling from Christ influence that?
I think...
Tell us what the step was first.
Okay, so I left my job, I took voluntary redundancy, and I started a befriending service for asylum seekers and refugees. And I think I just kind of knew that it was something I had to do. I was 40, it was my 40th year, and I just felt like if I don't do it now, when am I going to do it? And I'd spoken to the other agencies in Bristol who were working in the community with asylum seekers and refugees. And at that point of time in London, Bristol, there wasn't a befriending service for this community. So I was like, okay, well, I think we might need one. Asked other people what they thought, and they said, yeah, no, that would be good. And managed to fundraise. And I had no experience of fundraising, but I managed to raise, and this is incredible, really. I don't know quite how it happened. Miraculous, maybe. I managed to fundraise £19,000 before I started the project, which took me through my first year and beyond. And £1,000 was a banker's draft through our letterbox. I've no idea to this day who that was. And I'm like, I can't spend it on shoes, can I? What am I going to do? But it was literally like, I don't know who this is. And there was a note with it that just said, this is for your new project. You know, so, I mean, that was incredible. And I think I took that as a kind of green light. Yeah, I'm on the right path here. This is meant to be a thing. But it was a bit lonely, I think, initially.
Yeah. And in terms of your energy for this, how much do you think your encounters with Christ when you were younger fueled, and your sense of, you know, your worldview is shaped by Christ, isn't it? You know, the way you see the world is shaped by your vision of the resurrected Christ. Your personal relationship with Jesus is fuel for the fire. Do you think you'd have ended up doing this without those encounters with Christ, or is this who you are?
I think it is who I am, but there are some really fantastic people who don't profess a faith in Jesus who are doing some amazing things. But I think...
But personally, do you feel like that's something that you're...
Well, I don't know, because I feel like God's always been there.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's not like I had a massive conversion experience and kind of went, I must do something worthy, or, you know, that kind of stuff. But I think you know, let's face it, I have a very supportive husband, bless him. So, you know, it's not like I'm in a vacuum doing these things. Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
So you set up a friend, and then just recently you obviously...
By the way, just to say, Befriend became part of Bridges for Communities.
Yeah.
So I met Dan, and he agreed for Bridges to adopt me 3 years in. I then worked with Dan and Bridges for 7 years until last autumn. So it would be wrong not to mention the Dan Green and Befriend and Bridges. Yeah, and Befriend is still going, yes, yeah. Which is fantastic.
And then you moved into something else. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I don't know whether I have a 10-year itch thing going on. I'm slightly worried for my 60th year. The next one is the 60th year.
Off.
Oh my goodness. But yeah, I have always loved radio and talk radio specifically, and so I started volunteering with community radio in Bristol about 6 years ago, and learnt how to use all the stuff, and produced and presented the Arts and Culture Show on a Saturday morning for a while, and now I'm on the Breakfast Show on a Tuesday morning, and then I started podcasting. So I created a podcast during lockdown, and have been doing bits of reporting for BCFM and bits of audio inventions and things. And I did a commission that none of the photos have been up. I just said, oh, they have been up. And then, sorry, Ben. And then I did a commission, which is the latest thing that I did, which was about refugees, of course.
Yeah, and tell us about, we're going to hear from just a couple of voices from those... from that podcast that you did. Just tell us who they are. Okay, so the idea of the piece was I wanted to look at who has been coming to Bristol to claim asylum or to seek sanctuary over the past 50 years. So I started with someone who came as a child from Uganda in the 1970s and then brought it right up to date to the present day with 2 Ukrainian young women. So there were 5 contributors along the way. And the ones that we're going to hear are Diana and Jenny from Ukraine, who've been here about a year probably now, actually, almost a year. And then also we're going to hear from Adina and Seravash, who are from Iran, who have been in Bristol about 2.5 years, I think, now. Let's roll with you.
You are
The newest of the new refugees who've arrived in Bristol, how many days has it been since you arrived?
3 weeks. Yesterday was a month for me here.
What were your first impressions of Bristol on arrival?
Lovely city. I think that Bristol reminds me a lot about my city. I loved it, the culture, the music, the art, everything.
Who did you meet in the early days?
Our hosts, they're nice people. We have different hosts, so we live with different families. They were the first people who showed us the culture, the suspension bridge. Yeah, we will be thankful probably forever for everything.
How are you finding the food?
What me and Diana, we noticed that people here eat bread a lot. It's quite ironic, I think, that we produce a lot of wheat and we produce a lot of bread, but probably as a country who produces a lot of bread, we do not eat that much as young girls.
Yes.
This is a big question, but what do you miss about home?
Everything.
Everything.
Our friend, our family, my cat.
I miss my brother a lot, and I miss my turtle. I had a little turtle. And I miss my grandpa. He was my friend as well.
Do you feel like you are getting established here now, or does it still feel quite new?
Yeah, more or less. Yeah, it's get better. Every day get better.
It's definitely hard, but we have the support of the family that we live with. We can explore the city together. What is really hard to get used to is I wake up in the morning and I'm like, okay, everything is okay. And then I hear English language all around and it's hard to get used to.
It's especially hard for me because I don't understand English so good.
Bristol's very welcoming. Nothing but kindness and generosity here. Bristol may as well be our home. Thank you for welcoming us.
Yeah.
Thank you for making us feel as comfortable as possible.
How long have you been here in Bristol?
In Bristol, 3 years and 4 months.
Adina, when you arrived, what were your first impressions?
I arrived 21st of February 2019 and I arrived to Easton, to a share house which was very old and dirty and I was nervous.
How long was it before you managed to make contact with your husband?
9 months, I think.
What did you make of the weather?
Actually, the wind annoyed me and we cannot recognize how weather is today. Maybe in the morning it's sunny and in the afternoon it's crazy rain.
What did you miss about home?
I miss for everything about my city, my family, my culture.
Yeah, I miss my family, my mother, my father.
I'm not sad because I find new family here.
Who are your new family here?
I arrived to Bristol. I thought people are not friendly here. I finding kind people here and they support us same as my family. It was amazing for me.
Where do you think of as home now? You've got your little boy here who's almost 1.
To be honest, that I feel home here, but not same as Iran. Every time I miss Iran, I'm looking forward to back Iran.
This country is same as father for me, but Iran is mother.
Those are really moving stories. And you've talked to me before about seeing Jesus in people. Tell us some stories of how you've seen Jesus in people. I imagine you've seen Jesus in those people, right?
Yeah. I think you see Jesus in people who are displaced and desperate sometimes, and just when the rubber meets the road, they know that they need help. I also work at the Bristol Old Vic I have a part-time job there in the box office, and I see Jesus in the people I work with as well. So it's not just, people who are, in inverted commas, needy. But I have had some experiences of spending time with people, which is my most favourite thing to do, is to go to a cafe with somebody and just spend time. And one of those was with a youngish woman, I think she was maybe late 20s, who was from Indonesia, and she was trans, And she had an amazing Christian faith, and she had her gender reassignment and all that back home, and had faced massive persecution and had to flee. And it was like two girls together sharing Jesus. And it's not that we particularly talked about him, or I remember sharing with her a bit about, when life's really tough, we can pray and we can talk to him. But there was something quite profound in that moment of someone who has been through immense suffering and difficulty and was a long way from home and her family, and may even have been rejected by her family. And there was something about being with her that made me think, it was like Jesus was with us, like where two or three are gathered, there he is, and it felt like that. And then another one, and this is where I spent time with this woman and this family, but I then was able to give this person a volunteer. And this was an Indian family who, this was a real Romeo and Juliet story. So this was one of those scenarios where she had married somebody below her caste, and they had fled to the UK and had a baby here, and were living in this dark, dank basement flat in St George. And she had agoraphobia, couldn't leave the house, and was deeply, deeply depressed. And I was able to, when I was managing Befriend, give her a wonderful volunteer. And the volunteer sent me a photo about 5-6 months into their partnership of this woman with her baby at the seaside. And I was like, that is the kingdom of God. This volunteer, who actually is someone who's a Christian as well, had been able to encourage and get that family to the seaside and send me a photo of this little girl with an ice cream. And I was just like, that's why I do it, That is freedom. She helped this woman to get some freedom back. And that family got refugee status and are now settled somewhere. Amazing. What a privilege.
Absolutely. Now, you're talking there about meeting people and seeing Jesus in people's lives in their times of suffering, in their suffering. But you've also experienced suffering yourself, haven't you? Tell us a little bit about that. What's the missing narrative there?
Yeah, this is the big reveal. I have a diagnosis of bipolar disorder. And amazingly, I looked up a statistic here. Over 1 million people in the UK are reckoned to have it, and that is 30%, roughly 30% more than people who have dementia. So we hear quite a lot about dementia, don't we? But we don't hear very much about bipolar, and the amount of resources that go towards dementia is so much more than people who have bipolar disorder. So for me, it started, I started suffering from depression in my late teens, had insomnia, really struggled, flunked my A-levels, it would be fair to say, went off to university, and got halfway through my course, and had what I now realise was a breakdown. Couldn't leave my bed, couldn't cook, couldn't really leave the house. Thankfully, I was part of an amazing church in London where, it was sort of amazing. I think at that time, churches weren't very good with mental health issues. I think they're much better now. I think there's more knowledge now and awareness. Back then, I did feel like I was a bit of a freak, I have to say, which was an awful place to be in. But I had people looking out for me. I had some key individuals who basically, at different points, I think probably saved my life. So I had experienced depression, very deep depression. My 20s I sort of think of as a lost decade in a way, because it was pretty rubbish most of the time. I had a broken heart, I'd had a failed relationship, I'd had to drop out of university because I obviously couldn't get there, I was too depressed. And so that was my early 20s, and then I had my first experience of mania, which initially feels fantastic. You feel like you are the most attractive, the most funny, effervescent person on the planet, but there's a point at which a line is crossed and actually it becomes quite scary. And people around you start going, why did they say that and what they're doing now? And you kind of get a bit of a reputation, which is horrible because, you know, you can't help it, but you do, you know, I did some fairly wacky things, I suppose. But I didn't know what was going on, and it did coincide, for those of you that are aware of the Toronto Blessing, it coincided with that, which had some fairly wacky manifestations of the Holy Spirit, I guess, and yeah, not helpful for someone who already, you know, of her own will can be quite away with the fairies. So that wasn't great. Yeah, so it wasn't, but I didn't have a diagnosis until I came to Bristol.
And that's that's a pretty scary period of your life to go through, isn't it? How is your faith, or how is your relationship with Jesus through that time?
A bit confusing, I would say, at points, because one of the other things that has happened to me when I've had a manic episode is I feel very close to Jesus, and I feel like God is talking to me the whole time and giving me prophetic words for all sorts of people, and actually that's not always a safe place to be, and who knows whether it's God or not. I wouldn't say that it isn't always, but I would also say that some of the time it really isn't, and it's being unwell. But yeah. So I think, but in other times, so in the depression, and there will be people in this room who know what it's like to feel depressed. You know, I spent, I think, probably the majority of my 20s crying in church, you know. And there were times when the darkness was so horrific that I was living moment to moment, particularly in my early experiences of it. But I know, hand on heart, that God was with me. So even though I wasn't feeling anything, I was numb, I couldn't feel anything, I was, you know, in the darkness. God was with me. And it's almost like retrospectively, when you come out of the darkness, you can go, oh yeah, now I can see that God was with me, and he sent that person to tell me that they loved me, or I listened to a beautiful piece of music, or, you know, I stroked somebody's dog, or, you know, that kind of thing. It was like little things that lifted me out. But when I was in it, you know, it wasn't great. And there were times when I couldn't be in church because it was too painful. And I couldn't sing the songs, couldn't sing the victorious songs. No, thank you. You know, it was like, actually, where are the laments? And I think as a church, we're not great at lamenting. And I think it's totally okay to lament and say, you know, like Psalm 40, you know, how long have we got to sing this song for, God? You know, where are you? You know, I think we need to do a bit more of that sometimes. You look at the world, it's in a mess, you know. I think we can say, God, help us, you know, and how long have we got to keep on trying to put the goodness out there? Sorry, that's a long answer.
No, it's a great answer, because it's not an answer we hear someone articulating very much. And when we struggle with our mental health, which from time to time many of us do, actually trying to make sense of that in the light of a sort of, as you say, a kind of victorious kind of overcoming Christian gospel, that can be difficult to handle, especially if you're not feeling that. But you talked there about Jesus being with you in the midst of the pain. You didn't feel like at the time, you look back on it and you could see that Jesus was with you in the midst of it.
Can we just put the heart up? And I'll just explain what that is. So I'm not an artist, but I do like dabbling with paint sometimes. So I made that after a depressed episode, I think. And I just felt like there's a charity called Kintsugi Hope that I heard about, and I discovered what kintsugi was, and it's a Japanese way of mending broken pottery, okay? And what it does is it makes the brokenness and the repair part of the history of the item that's been broken. And they paint gold into the cracks, and so I did that as a kind of representation of all the colours in my life, which at times can be a little bit too bright, and at other times can be dark and horrible and sludgy. And so I did that to kind of encapsulate what bipolar is. It's my bipolar kintsugi heart.
It's amazing. It is amazing. And you talk about it being in the past, but it's not just in the past, is it? It's very
No.
much the present.
No, yeah.
What advice would you give to someone that's in the midst of suffering and you know, wants to connect with Jesus but isn't connecting with Jesus because they're in the midst of suffering, like you know, you were saying
Yeah.
in the dark times, it doesn't feel like Jesus is there.
Yeah.
Any advice for that?
I think I would say, hang on in there. I think you would say that Jesus is closer than a brother, and that you just, it will get better. Things do change. And I think in the moment when it feels so difficult, and I'm talking here about the depression, when it's so, so difficult and you just cannot imagine that you are going to smile again or feel hope again, I think I would say you have to almost go, okay, I know that I can't feel this, but I know it's true. There's a bit at the end of, I think, is it Habakkuk? That says, though there is no fruit on the vine, I will still praise you, you know. And it's like, I mean, sometimes you can't do that, and I think that's okay. There's this sort of idea of bringing a sacrifice of praise. I think at times you just have to go, I don't have it in me, and I think that's completely fine. You don't have to force yourself to worship God. And I used to try, on my knees, sing worship songs. Don't bother, you know. You just, it's like, it's Jesus hears, God hears kind of the internal, just groans, you know, when we are in that place, just reaching out to him and hanging on in there and telling other people what you're going through. Do not stay silent. Do not feel like you've got to just keep, you know, pretend that everything's okay. The last thing the world needs is a church that pretends it's sorted. They don't need that, you know, because they're not sorted. And so if we can be honest about our failings and what we're going through, our weaknesses, then they go, oh, well, we're like that too. You know, it encourages that openness and that vulnerability. And my life it's flipping hard sometimes, you know. It's really tough. And, you know, I mean, Rich would tell you, you know, it's hard. And I go up and I go down. You know, in the past few months, I've had a bit of an up and I've had a bit of a down. And it's not dreadful because I'm on medication, okay? But if I wasn't on that medication, I actually genuinely don't know if I would still be alive. I might have unalived myself, you know, because thank God for all the resources that we have to keep us well.
Absolutely.
But sometimes it takes a blimmin' long time to get well. And being patient is really tough, but we have to hang on in there.
I agree. And vulnerability is something that we talk a lot about. That there is a reward to being vulnerable, isn't there? I don't know if you would describe it like this, but when we do share openly and honestly with one another, we feel more connected with other people. I know for me, experiencing, sharing vulnerably about my own self and my own stuff that I've not told anyone before, created an incredible connection and bond with people that was so fulfilling. It was so satisfying and almost therapeutic in that sense. I know that we talk about the church as a community, but obviously we're part of families, we're part of wider communities. Being vulnerable in those contexts, you know, it takes a lot of courage. And any advice on that about sharing stuff about, you know, for you about being bipolar, sharing this in, you know, in different contexts? Any advice on that?
Yeah, I'd say choose the people you tell. I am quite an oversharer in most aspects of my life. I always have been. It's kind of who I am. And I kind of don't care, in a way. But I would say choose people you trust. You don't need people gaslighting you or any of that, you know. I think, and within a church scenario, there will be people who you can't always trust, maybe. So you need to build those relationships of trust. But I would say there is such a... Well, as you were saying, Owen, there's something really beautiful about being who you are with people, you know, and just, this is who I am, you know, and if people are worth their salt, they'll love you anyway, and they will learn from you. And it's just about, it's like we're a jigsaw puzzle, you know. We all need those pieces. And sometimes, you know, we need to look for the missing piece, you know. We need to look for the person on the edge. And I'm someone who I think will always be slightly on the edge of things, looking out for other people who are slightly on the edge of things. That's kind of another thing about my calling, I suppose. And there's an amazing Irish proverb which says, in the shelter of each other, the people live. And there we go. And, you know, we should be able to be each other's shelter. And under that shelter, we should be able to be exactly who we are. We should be able to laugh, cry, all those things, you know, and thrive as people. And I think when the world sees that, sees the church being that, they are attracted to it because they think, actually, I want to be part of that. I need that in my life.
Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. Could we just show Sam our appreciation for her sharing with us this morning? It's not easy to share in a public context. Anyway, it's even harder when you're sharing stuff that is painful. And we're just so grateful to you for opening that up to us, because it will help so many other people open up their own hearts as well. And if you are in a similar position where there's stuff going on in your life where you're like, I've never told anyone that. It's so brave of Sam to share that in that context. Hopefully her bravery will encourage you to share what's going on in your life with a trusted friend or family member, so that you don't just go through this by yourself, because that's no way to live, and it's certainly not the way Christ Jesus wanted us to live. So, please do find a trusted friend and share that. If you would like to share that with one of the team, you're more than welcome to do that. Do find us afterwards.